Hi, and welcome to another Rendaa Studio After Effects tutorial. I'm Mackenzie Criswell, and today we're going to be looking at creating a 3D logo using Element 3D. Alright, so what we've got here is a pretty basic logo, kind of put together in 3D for a sound designer named Hugo Pereira. It's pretty simple. It's based off of this logo here. As you can see, it's clearly just a direct derivative of it. We'll go ahead and get started. Create a new comp. I'll use 960 by 540. And the first thing I'll do is just create a white layer in the background, and that'll just kind of sit there. We won't do much with it. And then we'll bring in the Hugo Pereira or HP logo. So basically what we need to do inside of After Effects to get the plugin to work is we need to create some text with the letters Hugo Pereira on it, and we need to isolate these bars using masks so that we can extrude them. Element 3D only works using text or masks. There's not a good way to just kind of sample like a Luma value. Basically what we need to do is create one layer with these bars on it and another one with the text on it. Now for the text, we'll actually just use a text layer because trying to trace around that text is either going to take a really long time or it's not going to look that good using the auto trace features in After Effects. So we'll do that first. We'll go ahead and create a new text layer, and on it we will type Hugo Pereira, and we'll change it to black. I actually do know the font that they use, and that is Helvetica. So we'll just kind of try to get the scale right. Of course, no one's going to be looking at the actual logo. We'll adjust the baseline shift so that it'll be moved up. And we'll adjust the tracking a little bit. I think it was tracked out just a touch. It's probably the same thing was done here. Top. Okay, so that's really, really close to the original and probably as close as we'll get. And so I'll just go ahead and call this text. And then I'll hit enter and rename these bars. And what we'll do to get the mask for the bars is we could come in with the pen tool and just kind of trace around it, and that's definitely not a bad alternative, especially with a very simple shape like this. But the way we'll do it is with something called auto trace inside of After Effects. So it's layer auto trace, and what it does is traces around an object based on luminance, alpha, or a red, green, or blue channel. So we'll go ahead and tweak a couple of these controls so that it'll work better for actually isolating these bars. So we'll turn off the blur so that it won't be blurring it at all, and it'll just be getting the straight values. The tolerance will get as low as possible. Like that. Okay, so as you can see, it creates some masks. And the problem you'll probably notice right off the bat is that it traced our text, of course, and we don't want that. We can delete those masks. And it traced the outside, and we can delete that as well. But what you'll notice is it has several points on these bars where it's very simple, and we really only need 4 points, one in each corner. And this would be perfectly fine, except for since Element 3D tracks based on the points of a mask, whenever you go to input that mask into Element 3D, it creates a very jagged edge in that particular part. Okay, so the way that we're going to clean up the bars is just very simply, just kind of click on the points that are not on the corner and delete them. You may notice that on some of these smaller rectangles it just traces those 4 points, which is great because you just don't have to delete any of the other points. And so now we have all of our masks ready with 4 points. So The next step is to create a new layer. Shortcut for that is Command Y. Of course, you can also just come up to Layer, New, Solid, and we'll call this Element 3D. We'll come over to Effect, choose Video Copilot and Element. So what we need to do is set up our text and our bars layers, which we can actually shut off now, inside of the Element 3D's custom layer panel. That way when we get inside the scene setup, we can actually extrude those layers. So we'll come to Custom Layers, drop down the menu, drop down to Custom Text and Masks, and we'll choose Text, our text layer, and our bars. So we can shut that down, jump inside the scene setup. When we get inside of Element 3D, we'll just pop Extrude, and it will extrude our text right off the bat. Now, what I like to do is come to the bevel options and make it a pretty small bevel, about 0.3 versus the 0.5 that it was before. And depending on what I'm creating, you can mess with the bevel curve and the bevel depth and that type of thing. For this, we'll just bring up the segments to about 32, so to make it a little bit smoother. And we'll apply a material called Shiny. And you can see this pretty much matches what was in the original. And the reason I like this is because it has that nice black color on the front that we were looking for. But as the camera moves, it's going to pick up on some nice metallic colors and just really give a cool feel. And if we set up the lighting just right, it'll actually pick up on those edges and add a really great highlight. It'll pull some really great highlights and just, make it look amazing. Make sure you're leaving it on group 1 here. Make sure 1 is highlighted, and then we'll punch Extrude again. And we'll do the exact same thing. And the way that we can fix that is just go to Custom Path and change it to Custom Path 2. And now it'll be extruding the bars. So we'll come to the bevel options, and again, I'll just scale down the amount of bevel, probably even a little bit more. Bring up the segment so it's a little nice and curvy. And we'll apply this paint material, which is a nice blue material. Not anything too fancy about it, not anything too reflective, just a really subtle kind of looking material. And we'll make sure this one is on group 2. And that's pretty much it for the scene setup. Draft textures are okay to leave on here, like you can render with them, because these aren't really textures, they're just colors. As you can see, there's not any actual images loaded. So it's not loading an actual lower quality of the image, it's just literally loading colors. So you can leave draft textures on and it actually, even if you turn it off, it won't make it load any faster or slower. Okay, so we'll bring in our logo again as a reference point and start to set up our text and our bars so that they'll basically be at the same point in the logo at the very end frame. So we'll come to about the 6-second mark and line these up. So particle look, we'll start by scaling them down a lot. And we can just kind of grab this point in the middle and move them around. So if we scale it down some, move it pretty much, just kind of tweak it until we get it in the right position. Looks good. Hop over to group 2 and do the same thing. So that's how we get it set up, how we set up the actual layers. And so now we'll just add a really quick camera move. So we'll come to Layer, New, and add a camera. I like to use 35mm most of the time. And we'll come down in the options and just come to the transform properties and select position and point of interest and keyframe those at the 6-second mark. So then at that point it will basically be done with this movement, and we can just come over here to the Z track tool and just kind of have it scale down a little bit more. So that'll be our final camera move. The next thing would be to set it up at the beginning as it's going to be. So we'll come farther down into the camera options and we'll lock the focus distance, the zoom, the aperture, the blur level where they are, and make sure the depth of field is on, and then go to the very first frame. And we'll line it up. So we'll line it up exactly how we kind of want it to start, which is just kind of from the side and then really zoomed in so the camera rotates out. So if we come over to the waveform edit tool, you can see it creates some weird points and some interesting curves. But if you select all your keyframes in the waveform editor and hit this Bezier turn, the auto Bezier, it should smooth them out pretty nice. And that's actually a better solution to just hitting F9 on the keyframe, which is what's called Easy Ease. Because with Easy Ease, the Easy Ease keyframe does is it has the points ease in. So what ends up happening is before it hits any keyframe, it slows down, it hits the keyframe, and then starts to speed back up, which is very rarely actually what you want. So the better solution a lot of times is actually coming into the waveform editor and selecting your keyframes, of course, and selecting Auto Bezier. And just about the only thing left to do now is add a little bit of lighting. Okay, so the great thing about Element 3D is it's got a lot of lighting setups pre-built in, which are just lights that they have set up inside the app. So if you come to lighting and choose to add lighting, you can add your own. There's a few that are good. Dramatic and Cinema are a couple of my favorites. So you can really see it up here where it's changing it some. So I'll use this dramatic lighting setup. So you can see we've got some ambers and cool lights. And then I'll just add on to that a little bit. So the first thing I'll do is choose Layer, New Light. And I'll make it a perfectly white light and make sure it's a point light. And it'll just drop on. And what I'll do is pull it back in the Z space some. And what I'm going to try to do is just create kind of a hot white spot on the text so that it's a glowing point. See, something like that. Kind of right in between the bars and the text when it's first coming on. And we'll leave that white, and that just creates a kind of cool gradient ramp on the text a little bit. And kind of gives it some contrast so that we can really tell that it's 3D. If we turn it off, you can tell it's 3D, but just glancing at it really quickly, it'd be very easy to mistake it for just 2D layers with some shadows and different effects added in the background. And by adding lighting and things like that, it really just helps reinforce the production value put into a design like this, because you can tell now, hey, this is 3D, and someone actually put a little bit of time into this. Anyways, that has been a very simple look at creating 3D objects inside of Element 3D. I'm Mackenzie Criswell for Rendaa Studios. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you next time.